Try to imagine for a moment a different world than the one in which we live. In this alternate universe, intelligent beings comparable to humans reside on a planet somewhat similar to Earth. However, because of a slightly different set of initial conditions, natural laws have molded life forms over billions of years in alien ways beyond our comprehension. And the resulting intelligent beings, the result of eons of their own evolution, have been inspired to craft sound in order to express the world that they see around them. What would their music sound like? The extraordinary second album of Richard D. James under his main moniker Aphex Twin is maybe the closest we will ever get to hearing that recording. This is Selected Ambient Works, Volume 2. Brought up in Cornwall, England in the 80s, James grew up tinkering with electronics and modifying his own analog synthesizers, crafting sounds that he would later realize were similar to the acid techno scene that he would become involved in as an adult. He was self-admittedly disinterested in any music except his own as a youth, but through this isolation he developed a musical methodology that is incomparable to any other music artist. Completely removed from any of the established styles of the time, and benefited by extremely recent developments in technology, Aphex Twin is a rare instance in music history where an entirely novel musical framework is built from the ground up. And nowhere in his incredible discography is his individualism more telling than in the bizarre, otherworldly soundscapes he creates on Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. The result of years of self-imposed lucid dreaming, Volume 2 is at times relaxing and beautiful, at times unsettling and even disturbing due to the sheer alienness of what is going on. Musical uncanny valley is struck occasionally on this album where your brain is like, what the hell is this and is it going to hurt me? It's trippy to say the least, the enigma of this record being how it can paint such vivid pictures with sound. Sound painting is a good way to sum up what this record does. There are very few beats here, mostly just synthesizer strokes and warped samples on dark, cavernous, empty space. Interestingly, James has self-diagnosed synesthesia, which is a condition in the brain that causes sensory information to get conflated. So for instance, someone with the condition might get distinct smells when looking at certain objects, or perceive colors or shapes when hearing sounds. Based on what I hear in this album, I believe he has it, because he's creating such incredibly descriptive environments using music, building abstract visual structures with sound. There are 25 tracks on the expanded edition of this record, which I chose to cover because it contains the previously unincluded track 19, which I feel is an extremely important addition. It is a triple album on vinyl, with the songs lasting somewhere usually between 5 and 8 minutes. However, it is minimal. Each track is comprised of only 2 or 3 main instruments, so I'm not going to be taking too long on each song. All the songs are nameless on the album and just numbered 1 through 25. However, in lieu of names, they were each given a photo to go along with them, which were taken by Richard's girlfriend at the time. From these photos, the songs were given unofficial names by a fan on the early internet at some point, and those names have stuck in the community, so I'll mention those. And the photos are extremely cool too, so I'll include those and mention them if they relate to what I'm gleaning from the music. And I'll be using Mr. Incredible going from canny to uncanny to rate my excitement for each of these tracks, because name a better rating system. Okay, so track number 1, unofficial name, Cliffs. This song consists of 3 synths fading in and out and vying for attention. The first track in the background is a very tranquil, very aquatic sounding synth. Reminds me of light refracting through completely still water. It immediately makes me feel like I'm submerged in an ocean or a lake. Echoing piano arpeggios eventually flowed into the mix, which again reinforced the aquatic theme. They sound like something you might hear in, like, a Super Mario 64 water level. And the third track that keeps popping in and out of the foreground is very interesting to me. It sounds like it could be samples of human voices, but it also sounds almost synthetic to me, so it might be a synth. But it is the oddest bits and pieces of human-esque noises and vocal clicks. Going with the water theme, it reminds me of like mermaids communicating to each other in an unknown language. The mermaids get too close for comfort near the middle of the song. They sort of come out of the dark depths at the beginning until they sound very close and then recede away as the track ends. Really excellent use of claustrophobic reverb there. An extremely evocative start to the record and really sums up the idea that you're in for a somewhat relaxing, somewhat unnerving experience. I really like this piece. It's an excellent way to introduce the idea that this album is going to be more about environments than songs. And this is some of the most potent sound imagery on this project, period. I also need to mention before we get too far that the production on this album is unbelievably good. This is a man who knows sound engineering like it's a second language. He's painting worlds with sound, and really all of it is of the highest quality. This is also years before audio workstations like Pro Tools came around, which makes it even more impressive. The early software that Aphex Twin was manipulating to create his music is another rabbit hole entirely. See this video if you want more info on that. He's a tech genius, plain and simple, and his music is unlike anything that was being made then or has been made since. Next is track number 2, and its unofficial name is Radiator. This is the first taste we get of the full-on paranoia of this album. The song consists mainly of a single synth, which sounds sort of similar to a spacey, broken-down electric piano, playing two melodies and surrounded by deafening silence. The melodies mirror each other and are doing this demonic little dance together. The notes he's using are microtonal, meaning that they would reside in between half steps on the keyboard, and so they seem to slip out of key and create this woozy, dizzying effect. And then to make things worse, these jilted high notes start stabbing from above that make my hair stand on end. On top of all that, we then get noises that sound like breathing through an oxygen tank. Maybe this is supposed to be you as you probe the depths of this abyss, but even those noises start to hiss back at you and encroach on you in the mix. It is alarming. I want to mention the photo for this song. I think it is well chosen. It looks like the kind of stark superstructure that would appear to you out of the ether in like a surreal dream or a DMT trip. And I think it fits the vibe here as something inimitable and strange and imposing. Number 3, unofficial name Rhubarb, is the calm after the storm of the last song. A gently cascading synth progression that slowly builds on itself with harmonizing melodies as the song goes along. It's one of Aphex Twin's most popular songs. People seem to really like his slow contemplative tracks. But I don't like it that much. Okay, I still like it a lot, but I have my issues with it. Don't get me wrong, it's immaculately produced, as this whole album is. The synth he's using is lush and serene. My issue with this song boils down to the fact that the chord progression doesn't resolve itself. So instead of feeling the absolute serenity that I'm so close to feeling when I'm listening to this, I'm left dangling waiting for a resolution that never comes, which in my mind is the opposite of peaceful. You could make the argument that the song is reflecting the universe itself, which is never fully resolved, and that you're supposed to embrace the slow, endless orbit, but I can't do that. I want lasting peace, goddammit. This is so bothersome to me that I actually took that song off my Ambient playlist on Spotify, where it probably deserves to be. I just can't do it. If you think this song should be rated higher, I get it. It is a very beautiful piece that very easily evokes imagery on a grand or even like a cosmic scale. I understand if you think it's a 9 or even a 10, but this is my list. I'm sharing my perception of this record, and this is what it gets. Also, it's funny because the main melodic hook in this song is the same little hook that deadmau5 likes to use in his songs a lot. I don't know, I can't not think of deadmau5 when I listen to this. And I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Joel grew up listening to Aphex and that melody just got ingrained in his subconscious. That doesn't seem too far-fetched to me at all. Number 4, unofficial name Hanky, is A Nightmare. A very well-crafted, interesting nightmare. The main synth on this song sounds like some kind of enormous towering string instrument, like a violin, stretched way out with reverb to the size of a planet. And it is playing the most disturbing, wrong notes strung together. There's some other sounds in there too, like this moaning second synth and demented, alarming chimes. It is pure fear and anxiety related to something massive. Some terrifying new realization about the nature of the universe has just dawned on you, like a predatory alien species is descending on Earth and you're realizing that this is the way the universe has always been and you've always been the prey. However you want to visualize this song, you are not safe and something is very, very wrong. It is a thrilling experience that I will not put myself through very often for the sake of my heart. Number 5, unofficial name Grass, seems like a continuation of number 4. A very similar sounding synth is being used, however this one is quieter, much less alarming, and conjures feelings of unease rather than panic. If the last track was the traumatic event, then this one is the PTSD, basically. A similar sounding synth is still twisting through this series of wrong notes strewn together, but like I said, it's quieter, so the threat feels further away. There are also steady tribal sounding drums throughout this track, which creates anticipation of danger, like you're tiptoeing around a giant sleeping monster versus the track before where the monster is awoken and the world is coming to an end. This track seems like a logical progression of the last one. I feel like I need a minute to process the hell that I've been through on Hanky, and this track gives me that. So for that reason, I feel it's necessary to the flow of the album. Number 6, unofficial name Mold. How do I even describe this song? There is a human-like voice in the forefront, similar to track 1. Once again, it sounds almost human, but not quite. Audio Uncanny Valley, and it is producing vocalization that sounds bizarre, sort of like twum 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 twum, repeating that in a loop, and there's this percussive echo attached to it as well. It is a truly bizarre sound. That is the centerpiece of the song, with a minimal French horn and bass line sliding in eventually. This one doesn't conjure anything particular in my mind. It's so foreign sounding that I don't even know what I would relate it to, which could either be a plus or a minus depending on how you look at it. But I like the photo used for this song. It looks like the landscape of some barren, unexplored planet, and this could easily be some unrecognizable noise emanating from that world. Number 7, Unofficial Name Curtains, is a very intriguing song, one of my favorites on the record. It's a subdued, swinging major key melody which is prancing along on its own. It reminds me of a little girl skipping through a void of empty space. But the void is comforting here, not menacing. It feels like a refuge rather than a prison. It's interesting, if the melody was even a bit more dissonant or sour, then it would come off as creepy. But it doesn't. It feels like the innocence being displayed here is genuine and not a facade. I feel encapsulated, not trapped in the space of this song. And I can interpret the sweet little melody as a peaceful embrace of silence or of the infinite unknown. This song is helping me with my existential dread already. I'm a big fan. Other than the main melody, there are little accents and ad-libs over the top of it. All of them have a childlike innocence, but once again it rides that line of ambiguity in exactly the way that the presence of a little girl can come off as innocent or creepy like in a horror movie. It all depends on the context. I'm mesmerized by this song. Truly one of the strangest experiences this already wonderfully strange album has to offer. Number 8, Unofficial Name Blur is next, and this one is not great in my opinion. It's a steady thumping drum loop with a chirping hi-hat along with a couple of slightly jazzy minimal synth chords. If it evokes anything from me, it would be sitting in a waiting room, which, not the most exciting experience. Now look, before anyone starts saying, why is he ripping apart this album he was saying was so good? Look, I've said it before and I'll definitely be saying it again. No album is perfect. I'm not a believer in glorifying these classic albums to the extent that we erase their shortcomings from existence. Even the greatest albums in history have songs that are mediocre or subpar, or sometimes even straight up duds. Go listen to the Beatles' White Album, often ranked as one of the greatest albums of all time, and tell me Wild Honey Pie wasn't a fantastic miscalculation. Honey pie! Anyway, this song isn't even close to the level of that absolute disaster, but it is one of my least favorites on the album, and considering how long the record is, I think it definitely could have gone without it. To its credit though, the song is short, almost as if Richard knew it didn't deserve the length of some of the other tracks. Number 9, Unofficial Name Weathered Stone, is so damn cool. It's the first track on the album where the drums are the focus, excluding the last one. It has sort of a lo-fi hip-hop vibe, along with some bongos added in as accents in the mix. The bongos, as they do, threaten to give the song an earthy tribal sound, but Richard reels that in with a hi-fi kick drum and a glitchy-sounding snare, as well as these slick sine wave synth grooves. It is pure 90s hacker culture in a way that somehow doesn't feel dated at all, and I think that's because of the excellent production and the high quality of the instruments being used. That's something else I should mention about this album. It came out in 1994, but you could tell me that it came out yesterday and I would absolutely believe you. It's aged amazingly well, which is a rare feat for an electronic album from the 90s. I think it's due to Aphex's willingness to embrace sounds and textures outside of what was safe at the time, and press into unknown realms of innovation. He was building the future with this album, and it still shows 35 years later. Number 10, Unofficial Name Tree, is the type of track that would be suited as the soundtrack to a bad Benadryl trip, which is most Benadryl trips apparently. Just don't mess with Benadryl. The first layer at the start is built of deep, cavernous swells of bass, and then a bit later he introduces another high-pitched synth which sounds like distant bells tickling you with subtle but unsettling arpeggios. Then to fill up the mix, a third synth is added in the foreground, all of them playing foreboding tones that suggest danger or mysteries afoot. About halfway through the song though, the swelling low synth goes off and starts doing some pretty trippy stuff. It starts pulling closer, speeding up and getting grainier. It reminds me of the sound the engine of a UFO would make as it hovered towards you from behind your head. The suddenness of how the environment shifts strikes you with a similar sense of shock and dread. Along with the paranoid synths and a couple effects sprinkled in for added zest, it's another exciting trip through hell that this album has to offer. A major theme throughout this record is suspense and tension, with many of the tracks feeling like new frontiers waiting to be explored. Number 11, Unofficial Name Domino, is composed of meandering staccato synths which could almost be slightly dancey in some wildly different context, doing a lonely little jig in the midst of another vacuum of empty space. Once again, it's a microtonal melody, so it sounds very woozy, going slightly out of pitch. Over this plays a variety of feedback noises, sounding like a broken amplifier droning along with the out-of-tune synth melodies. It all has a very dilapidated feel to it. It comes off as slightly unnerving, but I should mention before we go any further that I could see someone braver than me interpreting a lot of the sound skips on this album in a different way than I do. Apparently this album was actually put together as a collection of cuts that Richard's friends selected as their favorites to chill and trip out to while they were high. Personally, I couldn't fathom listening to some of these songs while high since I'm an anxious person, but I could see someone who's more adventurous interpreting the sounds I see as creepy in a more positive light. Anyway, this song is pretty par for the course for this record. It doesn't create very strong imagery in my mind, but it's It's not really bad in any way either, it's just kind of meh. You can't really knock any of the songs on this record too hard because the production is so often inspired, but this one is certainly one of the less vivid sound pictures that this project has to offer. Number 12, Unofficial Name White Blur 1 is just, what the hell? Bells are ringing, muffled voices are muttering in the darkness, what sounds like tiny little Martian voices are scurrying around, there's the occasional jump scare with lasers suddenly firing and other effects. It is jarring, to say the least. This song sounds like you're on an operating table on some insane drugs as doctors are swarming you with pitch-shifting voices. Occasionally on this album, it feels like Richard's entire goal is, how can I screw with people the most? Which is totally in line with his personality. He's using his powers for evil, and that is honestly despicable. I originally wrote a curmudgeonly, snobby music response to this song with complaints like, it doesn't fit the flow of the album, or it has no value outside of cheap scares. But then I thankfully stopped being pretentious and just thought about the effect that this song has on me when I listen to it. I am paralyzed with fear. You can say what you want about how this fits into the album. It does feel like Richard is sort of playing a prank on you, but that is who he is. He's a prankster, and he has the engineering chops to make his pranks state of the art. This whole situation reminds me of how film critics treat a movie like The Grudge, for example. They pick it apart for all these different reasons and basically say it sucks. But you know that for most of them, walking up the stairs is going to be a difficult task for the foreseeable future. Track 13 is the only song that has a verified official title because it was on a compilation album where it was given a name, and it's called Blue Calx. It starts out with a steady, quiet woodblock beat which continues throughout the track, and over that sounds like bubbles bursting in a cavern. And it seems like you might be in for another anxiety-inducing experience, but then the most lush, tranquil synth greets you and instantly melts your unease. It's a similar synth to number 3 Rhubarb, but this progression actually does have resolution, so I automatically like it more. Suddenly you view the previous instruments in a new light, and the track becomes the epitome of bliss for the rest of its runtime. I love this song. I could so easily fall asleep to it, and I would probably dream of being hugged by a teddy bear on a cloud. Number 14 goes by the unofficial name Parallel Stripes. A staticky, resonating feedback tone begins the song and remains throughout, followed by a pensive, delicate synth playing long, sustained notes overhead, carefully reaching out into the darkness. The static keeps the track from existing in the deafening silence of most of the other songs. It actually sounds exactly the way Richard described the album in his own words, like standing in a power station on acid. Personally, I wouldn't say that the whole album sounds like that, but that's definitely an excellent way to describe this song. Maybe this is what he was thinking of when he said that. This is a strong track. Definitely one that gives me a very specific feeling, like I'm being transmitted through power lines in slow motion, or like I'm floating along one of the electric highways of the World Wide Web. I'm a subatomic particle when I listen to this, and I can say that I enjoy the freedom. Number 15, unofficial name Shiny Metal Rods, is the first song on this record that is entirely percussive. It's a beat, and a damn good one at that. The instruments are super grimy, drenched in muddy distortion, chugging along in a manner that reminds me of being in the gas-encrusted engine room of a cruise liner. Almost all the instrumentals up to this point have been made of pure flawless liquid chrome, but this one is dirty as hell, and I like that. However, it still comes off as not quite terrestrial with some of the futuristic drum choices. Maybe this is the engine of a dirty cargo carrier making an interplanetary voyage. I love the instrumental breaks and all the variety of this track. Richard switches up the beat in all these interesting ways and knows all the notes to emphasize at the right times with effects that just sound cool. It's intuitive beat making at its finest. It kind of veers into IDM territory, but also manages to keep up with the themes of the album, sounding like another transmission from outer space, just a drum-focused one this time. Number 16, unofficial name Gray Stripe, is some pretty trippy ambiance. It sounds like a field recording if you took the recording on Pluto. The track begins with the sound of whistling wind blowing through an enclosed space, which sounds too metallic to be a tunnel or a cave. It's more like an H.R. Giger corridor of a massive ancient mothership. Then the air suddenly gets compressed into a hiss, and morphs into what can only be described as classic alien sounds. Like literally the Wii U cockpit noises, the pitch-shifting sound waves and all that. It finishes off with what sounds like a rubber band being stretched to infinity, and then contorting in all these unnatural ways. Almost sounds like a Hollywood rendition of Aliens clicking to each other to communicate, just with way more reverb. This song I'm not a big fan of. My main issue is that it's too on the nose. I get that Richard was trying to make an album that sounds like it was beamed here from outer space. You've already done that to great effect on other tracks. I don't feel like I need a track full of obvious alien noises. However, I do respect his ability to mold sound. His ability to play with frequency at the very least keeps your interest. But this doesn't really feel necessary to the record and really only serves to disorient the stoners. Number 17, unofficial title Z-Twig, is a very short song compared to most of the others, only 2 minutes. and it's a happy melody played with a xylophone-like instrument along with some bubbly, echoing synths and some twinkling high notes. It uses the huge amount of space in the mix created by the reverb to find childlike joy in the solace. To me, it emphasizes the underlying playfulness present in all of James's material. Even when he's scaring the crap out of you, it's coming from a mischievous place of having fun and messing around. As hard as it is to believe that while I'm experiencing the horrors of Hanky. God, that song is scary. I love the innocence of this song, though. It feels like a little break to remind you of the good in the world, before shoving you back into the shit, playfully. Number 18, Unofficial Name Windows, is another tribal-sounding beat-driven song. There are indigenous drums and cymbals and wind instruments being used more so here than on any other track. However, the electronics being used in tandem once again keep the song from having a completely earthy sound, although here just barely. I like the tribal environments on this record because they go with the themes of exploration that are present all over this album. You experience the jungle in the same way that you would experience the terrain of a different planet, with the same caution and intrigue. So I love the parallel Richard is drawing here. This is a pretty good track overall. I think it's necessary for the narrative flow of the record, and I love how it transforms the earthly into the alien. Number 19, Unofficial Name, Stone in Focus. This song is composed of 3 main instruments, a robust main synth, a bass synth that sort of melts into the main synth and gives it a very full, resounding texture that really burrows into you, and a tiny metal ticking noise. And it evokes some of the deepest thoughts and emotions a human being can have. I hope I can do it justice with my description. The 3-chord melody that revolves around and around throughout the entirety of this song is so simple, yet has such a powerful longing to it. And paired with the ticking sound that obviously represents the passage of time, the song embodies the confliction present in the mind of every being that knows what it is to be conscious. It is so bittersweet to be caught in this fleeting moment in time, knowing that one day everything we love is going to pass on, every approaching second inching us closer to a destination that could be an end or a whole new beginning. It is so tragic to bear the human condition, and this piece of high art gives a voice to that quiet tension present in all of us with disarming simplicity. It is a simple yet infinitely complex feeling, and to embody it in song so effectively using really only 3 instruments is masterful. As you can probably tell, this is the long-awaited 10 that this album deserves. An absolutely essential piece of electronic music that belongs on any greatest lists of the genre. A style of music that has been criticized for its inhumanness and sterility ironically contains one of the most human songs in modern music history, communicating an undercurrent that we are all subtly aware of every day of our lives. This track is a touchstone in the world of minimalist music. Number 20, Unofficial Name Hexagon, is a steady but slightly glitchy beat with a few intersecting synths playing a variety of major, carefree melodies. But despite the higher amount of tracks going on this song at once, it manages to be maybe the most mid-song on this entire project. There's nothing bad about this song, there's nothing that great either. It is just a very standard IDM song, and because of its amazing neutrality, I'm going to give it a below average score. To ride the coattails of 19 is a hefty responsibility, and this song just isn't up for the task. Not an unlistenable track in any way though, and it's not lengthy so it doesn't feel like eons before it's on to the next song. Number 21, Unofficial Name, Lichen. It is a choir of pastoral synths playing a melody that I know I've heard before, but I can't pinpoint where. But it reminds me of childhood and sweetness in the way a traditional melody like Bicycle Built for Two does. It feels like it has always existed. Anyone who's seen that scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey knows exactly what I'm talking about. I actually forgot about this song on the track list, and it instantly went on my Ambient chill playlist. I dare you to put this track on and not feel total peace and serenity. A beautiful track, and actually the last beautiful track before this album really takes a turn for the darker. Number 22, Unofficial Name, Spots, is sort of the gates of the hell that is the last leg of this record. It's constructed out of menacing, almost spiteful drones emerging and dissipating like smoke clearing after some horrific disaster. Out of the moans of noise, you can make out female voices whispering some sort of incantation at you, although they're hidden so well behind the wall of disturbing noise that they almost sound just like random shuffles. The song literally wants to make you think you're hearing voices like a schizo, like, damn, Richard is a bastard. I'm just waiting for a jump scare that never comes. It's exactly the feeling of watching a horror movie scene where you know the monster is around the corner and you're waiting for it to appear. Total fear, expectation of torment. If I heard this while high, which once again is apparently how Rich and his psycho friends like to spend their time, I would absolutely be thinking Satan had found me, and God only knows what I think he would be saying. This is some prime horror audio, though I don't exactly know how it fits into the concept of this record. It's not as otherworldly as some of the other songs. It feels like I'm on Earth, but just in a situation that I'm definitely not supposed to be. I am the final girl in this song. Pretty scary track, but not the scariest of the 3 songs leading up to track 25. Oh no. Number 23, Unofficial Name Tassels, is just... huh? It's a swirling vortex of flangers, and yeah, that's basically what it is. If you don't know what a flanger effect is, here's a sample. However, occasionally there are horns that sound over the mess, which strangely almost sounds like a military bugler playing taps. It's like I'm remembering my fallen comrades as I'm being blasted with lasers by aliens. Very strange sensation. This is my least favorite song on the album. It's an extremely simplistic idea that doesn't communicate anything of value or really anything at all. I don't glean anything from an ocean of flangers and a military bugle player. It also feels as quote-unquote on the nose as track 16, with the stereotypical alien noises. This song is fluff. Plain and simple. There is nothing to it other than tripping out the stoners, and in my opinion, it should not have been included on the album. The image that was picked for it is good though. If you picture the tassels as frequencies, it is a literal depiction of what's going on. Cool photo to go with an unfortunate dead of a track. Number 24, Unofficial Name White Blur 2. This song... Come on, Richard. A little girl, are you kidding me? This song literally has a loop of a demented little girl laughing, as the most warped microtonal synths unnerve you in the foreground while distorted pitch-shifted voices mutter incantations from behind. I'm losing my grip. This is the clown realm. This is the dark carnival, just like Violent J said. I listened to this album through with my girlfriend at night, and this song had her screaming. This is the definition of insanity. It feels like I'm inside the mind of a mental patient. I mean, how do you even rate this? It is definitely creepy, I will give it that. However, compared to the paralyzing horror of Hanky, which as you can tell is the benchmark of fear on this album, compared to that, it feels a bit superficial. Yes, obviously little girls are creepy, as are muttering schizophrenic voices. They will always cause stress. Although saying that doesn't make me feel any better. And again, what is the point of this other than Richard getting a laugh from screwing with his listeners? I'm gonna go midway with it. It's not bad. It is genuinely unsettling, however, not extremely original, and also doesn't feel essential to the track listing. And finally, number 25, Unofficial Name Matchsticks. This track is filled to the brim with these pondering, suspenseful synths. Some of the synths sound like a choir of fearful voices harmonizing together. Others are not as human, but equally as foreboding. And they all give the impression that they're providing insight into something, or shedding light on something dark. All the while, murky, dissociated drums echo upward from far beneath, almost like the footsteps of the person making this discovery. This song is a film score. Not in actuality, I don't think, but in essence. This feels like I'm in a thriller movie at the exact moment where the hero is descending into the lair of the villain in order to discover the truth of what's really been going on. I'm Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, about to descend into the den of Buffalo Bill and see the horror of what he's been hiding. I got chills listening to this with that context in mind. It would be such a match for a scene like that. Any film composer would be hard-pressed to make a track as effective as this at creating a feeling of sheer suspense. In fact, it's so perfect for that setting that it makes me swear I've heard it in a movie before somewhere. This track is excellent. What a way to close out the project. It's what makes this Aphex Twin record the greatest album of all time. Thanks for watching. Bye.